everybody, and welcome to another Project Egg interview. Today we're talking to Joe Sinkwitz from Phoenix, Arizona. Joe, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Great, thanks for coming. Let's jump right in. So, my first question for you is, what is your story?
My story. All right, so I am the son of a programmer, and that's not so strange now, but it was when I was growing up. In the early 80s, we were probably the first family in our city to have a personal computer.
Wow.
So I was probably that first generation of the Gen X where, by the time I was in kindergarten, I was familiar with computers, growing up through high school, et cetera. For most of my peers, that was not really the case. Most didn't really get experienced with devices until they were in high school. So it kind of skewed my outlook. So I've always been a little bit ahead when it comes to technology from the early days. Dad is still a COBOL programmer. He's in his 70s. I don't think he's ever going to stop. He might actually be the oldest active living programmer that's being paid. I ended up being fairly entrepreneurial growing up. Had a variety of side businesses, did some questionable things, of course. We lived kind of near a golf course. I'd get golf balls that went off the course, polish them, and sell them back to the golfers until I got chased away. Realized that the drink carts charged quite a bit of money, so I would go to the grocery store, buy, and then sell to the golfers at half the price until I had a cease and desist at, I think, age 12. That was good. I was a sandwich artist, if I could actually say that, in high school, and I recognized that I really, really hated it. I was good at making sandwiches. I make a mean sandwich today, but I just did not see the value of, I create one sandwich or I create 50 sandwiches, my pay was always going to be the same. It was kind of a terrible experience from that perspective, or rather a good one in terms of knowledge. But what I did learn was the guy that worked next door to me sold videos. He liked sandwiches too. I was allotted a sandwich a day for my own personal use. But I could also just take that sandwich and sell it to him. Maybe. Well, I found out that I wasn't allowed to sell it to him, but I was allowed to give it to him. And in return, he was able to give me expired videos of an adult nature that I was able to then take to school and sell. And I actually made more money selling the smut that actually paid my way to college than any legitimate practice. In college, tried to start a bunch of companies. Didn't really work. Yeah, you find that you end up being far more broad in a project idea of, we're going to change the world, when it was probably the wrong focus, just focusing on one little thing. In that time period, I ended up falling into SEO, where I took a job with a physician. And the physician wanted to sell medication online. And so I monkeyed my way and figured out how to create a website. Back then it was a Microsoft front page. It was horrible, but we got through it, and it was pretty good for what it was compared to the rest of its peers at that point in time. Then he decided, hey, how do I sell Viagra online? I'm like, well, let's figure this stuff out. And I ended up going to Alta Vista at that point in time, looking to see, what did everyone else do. I was double majoring in information systems and operations management at the time, so I was still pretty technical. Figured out what they were doing. We ended up learning how to spam Alta Vista, and that kind of got me started in this career on digital marketing. From there, I graduated, and I thought I should need to take a real job versus what I was doing, and I ended up developing tax software for KPMG for a couple of years. It was a really good company, but a really boring thing to do. Tax is not that interesting. I guess fast forward a while, I then spent a couple decades, or I guess now it has been about a couple decades, growing in the realm of search and all the tangentials that have sort of jumped off of it. Being a thought leader, keynoting on multiple continents, and just trying to understand where everything's moving. I've been involved in a lot of interesting phrases on the web for people that are looking for loans or insurance or various products, and kind of led me to you actually on Facebook through one of those endeavors.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So, I kind of want to jump back a little bit and touch on some things as part of your history. So, um, you said that because your father was this programmer, you were kind of shown or exposed to that kind of technical know-how and technical prowess early on. Can you point to um, kind of specifically where that has helped you in what you're doing today, and how that's kind of come back to pay dividends over time?
Sure. I think what really impacted me is that whenever I'm faced with a problem, I always try to break it down into how it could be computationally solved. And I think that because of the upbringing, that was always a way of thinking. It was never a think of, oh, we're going to have to sit down and put this all on paper. My initial thought process is, my handwriting's so bad and I hate writing. How could I take this information and throw it in a database? How could I take this and just put it in a spreadsheet and do a pivot table and come to the solution I need to have? Um, Obviously, that has evolved since those early days, but even then, I learned to do math in, let's call it like 1983 on a computer called the Aquarius, which was created by Mattel. So it was literally a toy, but it was a real computer, ran basic programs on the basic programming language, and I learned that way. I mean, I always was learning in that methodology, which probably also explains why I am unable to write my name to save my life.
All right, that's funny. That's funny about the handwriting, but that I think that really does kind of shed some light, and it just kind of points out the fact that what you do at a younger age really helps to pay dividends moving forward. Um, and you mentioned that you had all this exposure to programming, but you also mentioned that you were entrepreneurial at heart. Um, how did you? I guess what inspired you to do that? Where did you get that motivation to just be entrepreneurial in your day?
I mean, I could make up a story about grandparents being entrepreneurs or something, which they were, but I didn't know them. I never met them, and I don't know how much of this is sort of genetic. I think it just sort of happenstance. I saw an opportunity and I acted on the opportunity. I really think it's as simple as that. I am an Eagle Scout, so I ended up going to a lot of Boy Scout camps over the summers, and they always had a single shop that was sold, candy, sodas, etc. I would always go to, at that point in time, it was called Price Club, now just Costco, and I would spend as much money as I was allowed to from my piggy banks and whatnot to buy candy in bulk, and I would compete with the snack shop. So I was always coming home with more money than I left constantly. So I, if I have to point to anything particular, it just sort of happened. I would just always sort of see an angle and act on it, uh, and try to stay within the realm of what's allowed.
So, so it's not as much risk taking for you as seizing opportunities, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd see it more of a risk to not do that than to do it. It just never occurred to me that, why wouldn't I try to compete, or why wouldn't I try to make a little extra money? Because it wasn't even really difficult. It was always a scenario where the people were coming to you, so it was just a matter of giving them what they already wanted.
Right, right. Um, but let's add some value to this call, because I feel like a lot of people um, are either they're just starting out as entrepreneurs, or maybe they're struggling to kind of take that leap. Um, what guidance and advice would you offer to those people to kind of help them get started on their entrepreneurial journey?
Okay. So I like to define, I make lists and I like goals. It's not so much to have a monetary goal out in your mind, although it's nice to have the blue skying effect of, putting everything out there. What I like the most though is figuring out backwards of, okay, let's say that you want to be a millionaire. Okay, what are your current skill sets, and starting to create a mental map, walking backwards from, all right, maybe my chosen path is going to be on being a big YouTube influencer. So, all right, if I need to do that in order to make the money, that means I need to have the contacts within the realm of YouTube in order to make that money. If I need to get the contacts, that means I need to have a certain audience size. In order to get the certain audience size, I need to attract them by creating the right type of content. Or do the right kind of content, I need to understand how content's created, how the skill sets. In order to do that, I need to become really good at the skill set. So you could work backwards, and then you find yourself at a starting point. You say, okay, I now understand that in order to reach this particular goal on this path, I need to become an expert. I am a big fan of becoming an expert in at least one thing, and that really just involves a lot of time. It's kind of thrown out there as almost trite advice of 10,000 hours minimum to become an expert in something, but it's pretty true. If you bust your ass for at least 10,000 hours in any specific field, you will be better than most people in that field. You don't have to be the best. You just have to be better. And if you start applying, okay, taking the expert and then twist. Let's say it's creating video, and there's no one doing videos on, I don't know, styrofoam cups. Well, there could be a big market in it. I don't know. And so you do a little bit of keyword research, and you find out, wow, I could become the guy doing videos on styrofoam cups. Who knew that was a thing? And before you know it, you've already become, did the content creation, then you have your videos. If you end up finding the contacts, because they'll find you once you have an audience. Before you know it, you've reached your goal.
That's awesome. That's brilliant. So I think there are kind of two segues to this that I want to touch on. But the first is, you talked about the importance of setting a goal and then kind of reverse engineering it from there. But how important is it to set big goals? Instead of saying, okay, I want to have 1,000 followers on YouTube, say I want to have 10 million followers on YouTube. How important do you think setting enormous goals are?
I think they're good. They're the big, hairy, audacious goal, as everyone seems to call it. I see little difference in having 1,000 or 10 million. The biggest difference to me is the timeline. So I see 10 million as just being an extension of the 1,000. All the things that you need to do are going to be more or less the same. It's just repeated consistently in order to get to that 10 million. What I like to do is once a year, I have a brainstorming through all the various companies that I own, and I will try to figure out all the things I might do. Then on a weekly basis, then on a weekly basis, I make 3 lists. I do a list of anything that's going to increase revenue. I do a list of everything that's going to decrease cost, and a third list is the things that don't easily get bucketed in either of those two. Then I try to apply some logic to it. I'm a nerd, man. So I try to determine, okay, what's the timeline associated with each particular task? What's the actual impact in terms of a dollar amount? What's the probability of success? Those various things, having a little equation. Before I know it, if I'm doing this every Friday evening, when I come to Monday and I see what are the things I need to do, not only is it more or less sorted in terms of what I could have the most impact in, but I don't feel lost at all. Even if I'm in the wrong direction, I feel like I'm doing something actionable, and chances are, probably am.
Right. One of my really good friends, Dale Roberts, he talks about MFA, which is massive fucking action, and he says that MFA creates it creates things. As long as you're moving, as long as you're going somewhere, you'll see results. It creates results. And so, I think that's kind of what you're getting at, is that, when you kind of break it down and you seem like you're building a lot of lists and you're very analytical and reverse engineering. And I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant, excuse me. You're breaking it down to a science and a very logical way to get there. But it does come down to action, like you're saying, and I think you're totally right. But let's go back to when you were talking about taking the 10,000 hours to master something, because I think that, well, a lot of people, that makes sense to them. I mean, it's a basic concept. You spend 10,000 hours doing something, you're going to be better at it than most people. How can somebody work smarter to where those 10,000 hours are being extremely well spent?
Yeah, that's difficult, right? I think if we look at mobile computing, there's a lot of things you could do to distract yourself. How much of the time period, if you're trying to become an expert in Facebook ads, is spent accidentally reading Facebook and getting sucked into the threads and whatnot. So I think from there, it's a matter of taking any particular subject matter and exploding it. So you're saying, okay, here's all the elements related to the subject matter. I'm going to give myself a time budget. I'm only going to spend 100 hours on this subject. I'm only going to spend 100 hours on this. If you do that for all the various pieces of it, well, that's already going to be thousands of hours probably. But then by that point too, you'll also have a better understanding of what areas need deeper exploration and which are just kind of basic. Okay, it's the hooks of an API. That's the same everywhere else. I don't need to explore further, but I really need to understand why they have the feed set up this way, whatever it might be. You will find that no subject is unilaterally similar. There's always areas that you can go deeper, and some areas that shallow is sufficient. Do you really need to understand, quantum mechanics if you're getting into, creating a new database for storing stuff? Probably not. It's not going to affect you a whole lot right now.
So I think that that's a really good point of kind of breaking out your one big thing into a bunch of subsets and trying to master those. But again, let's add some value to this call. So, I think we should pick something and let's actually break it down. Let's actually break it down for the audience. It could be something that you're working on right now. It could be something that you've already mastered. But if you wouldn't mind picking one thing and actually breaking it down and demonstrating for people that it's not that complicated to come up with this plan.
Okay, sure. So I'll do search engine optimization. I've been doing it for 20 years now. Now, SEO, it looks like rocket science to some people, and it looks like bullshit to others. And you could really boil it down to three general directions. So you have engagement issues, you have content, and you have links. Then you could start drilling down in that. Engagement, well, what does that come from? That could be user experience. It could be specific user interface design. It could be based on conversion rate optimization. It can be based on site speed. And then, you start saying, okay, site speed, what does that look like? There's all sorts of infrastructure considerations. How you structure site to be quicker, how you structure site to load things simultaneously, all that sort of stuff. You could back out, then you can get into content. Is it content to convert? Is it content to explain and educate? Is it content meant as a teaser for future content? Then you can go into types of content. Is it static, like a blog page? Is it more edutainment, like an infographic? Or maybe it's an interactive designed to get a lot of press play because they look at something pretty that moves around and say, I need to give a link to this, that you're in the background shuttling link equity somewhere else. So now we're talking about links. Links can be, we can look at anchor text on links, whether it's branded, whether it's specific anchors, like I'm doing my payday loan sites. Or maybe we're going to be digging deeper into that, and it's going to be based on tangential phrases to my stuff, not necessarily specifics. Beyond that, maybe we're talking about types of links that we need to understand, whether directory articles, they're from major newspapers, they're from, when you say MFA, my version of MFA is made for AdSense, so it's a little bit different. Those are usually junk sites. We can just kind of get deeper and deeper in this hierarchy. And if you understand fairly well, aspects of content, you could become really specialized just in content and have a fantastic career. I know people that do that. And generally by doing that, you also end up knowing bits and pieces about links. You understand bits and pieces about engagement. If you're able to put everything together, you're able to charge, $1,000 an hour and, sit pretty fat and happy.
Right, right. And, I do want to thank you for going that in depth, because I do think that it's very valuable for those that are listening. It's the community that really matters. So, that just goes to show that even something as seemingly difficult as search engine optimization, it's three ideas. It's three ideas, and each of those can be broken out into a subset. And like you said, you don't even have to be good. You don't have to be a master in all of those things. You can drill down and find one thing specifically, one niche that either is being overlooked or you have some competitive advantage in, and you can really make that your own. You can be the guy in that thing. But anyways, to segue back to your life, so we talked about your programmer background. We talked about your entrepreneurial background. I have a question for you about when you worked at that sandwich shop. What would you say is your meanest sandwich? What's your best sandwich?
I invented the meatball roast beef sandwich. And
Wow.
so you take a meatball sandwich and you layer on the roast beef, you put it on some mozzarella cheese. You're also able to take these we call it a proofer. So you take the breadstick, essentially, put it in there, and it moisturizes at a low heat in order to puff it up with the yeast in it, and then you bake it. We also figured out if we spread them flat, you have almost like a football-shaped thing. You just throw on the marinara sauce and a little bit of cheese, and you make a little mini pizza while you're waiting for customers. So there's a lot of opportunity for those in the sandwich world.
That's awesome. So see, you found what made a really good sandwich, and you niched down into meatballs and roast beef, and you connected them, and you made something new. That's great. That's great. So, I think as part of any entrepreneurial journey, you need some sort of education, whether that be reading books, attending seminars, or learning from mentors. And it's mentors that I want to talk about right now. Who would you say have been your biggest mentors in your life?
Tricky. It's tricky. Because I keep finding myself in fields where there haven't been many people out in front of me, I end up having more of a peer relationship. So I'll choose people like Aaron Wall of SEObook.com. He was definitely like a peer mentor to me on certain aspects of SEO, where I could rely on him doing a deep dive somewhere and creating a summarization when I just simply did not have time to do that. To a degree, let's see who else we got. Eric Kaufman. He's the guy that hired me to develop tax software for him years and years ago. He's definitely been a positive influence for me in terms of just how to approach your life as an entrepreneur. My issue has been I am not good with work-life balance. I'm good at work, and then occasionally I have a life, and that's difficult because I am married with 3 kids. But he's helped me to understand when to pull back, when it's okay to hang up the hat on the door at 4 in the morning. So I think those 2 gentlemen definitely played a role. I read a lot, or at least I used to, a lot of business books. I was a huge fan of actually Charlie Munger more than Warren Buffett. And Munger was a big fan of a German algebraist by the name of Jacobi. Jacoby's big thing was invert, always invert. And that's sort of how I learned to reverse engineer any problem that you come across in order to find the solution. So every problem is an opportunity if you just flip it around. It's a kind of a trite thing to say, but it truly is the reality. If your issue is DMV lines being too long, there's probably a solution for it. If your issue is not having enough money for a car, there's a solution for it. Whatever the problem is, there is a way to think about it from an angle of opportunity. And that's what it helped, with the Munger's positive attitude, and then Jacoby's mathematics behind that kind of guide my path a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that actually kind of segues into my next question, which would be if you could pick 3 books that you would recommend to aspiring entrepreneurs, what do you think that would be?
Okay. I'll start with Charlie. So I'll do Poor Charlie's Almanac, which is similar to Warren Buffett's collection of quotes, but it's more for Charlie's point of view. So that'd cover him. I would probably do Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. It's not a business book, but it helps to understand how history unfolded and why it unfolded the way it did, in terms of why was Europe the one that ended up colonizing the Americas versus the other way around. It's an intriguing way to look at life. And the third might be, boy, it was a terrible book, but I was a big fan of his. Bill Gates, The Road Ahead. It was a really bad book. I think it was the period of time where Microsoft was at its zenith, and he probably said no to every editor, and my word is God sort of thing. But he ended up calling a lot of trends early, and I really appreciate how he's become the modern day robber baron, taking a lot of the cash he made and doing a hell of a lot of good around the world. So that's something I hope to do at some point in my career.
That's great. That's great. So we kind of talked about your past, and we talked a little bit about education, about kind of what you've been doing. But what do you maybe you could shed some insight on what you're doing now, kind of what the biggest project that you're working on now is.
Sure. So I'm primarily spending a lot of my time on 2 different companies. One company is set up as an agency, so it's search stuff, so Digital Heretics, and we're generally contacted by people that have screwed something up. So our business model is online reputation management. So a CEO does something they shouldn't have done, maybe with a member of the staff, and we make bad things go away. So by virtue of just spending a long time in search, we understand, I think, that as Google has shifted their philosophy to every site is bad versus every site is good, it was a philosophical shift that they made in 2009. Instead of bemoaning about it, which we did bemoan a little bit because we were making 10 million a year at that point in time, we shifted into a role of, well, if everything's going to be negative first, then we might as well focus on the negative. And that turned into its own business model. The other thing, you see the little banner behind me, Intellifluence, that happened because I recognized that the influencer marketing world was starting to explode. It's very, very hot right now. But the problem with it is, the agencies want a huge cut, and they want gigantic minimum monthly payments. They want $20,000 a month just for any business that wants to do anything with influencers. I recognized, well, what about a startup? What about small businesses? How can those guys play? And the reality was they really couldn't. A couple people have started up at around the same time as we have, so that's good to see. But the small businesses really weren't able to play. And then I recognized, well, why is everyone focused just on that top tier of people? Is Kim Kardashian really the best person selling a car? Is she the best person for that local running shoe company? No, probably not. And so I started to divide it out in terms of, okay, you have your celebrity aspirational influence. Everyone wants to be like those people. then you have the authority people. So if a Ben does a podcast talking about entrepreneurs, and he says this is the entrepreneur way to do things, people are going to listen to you a little bit more than they might Kim if she's just doing that right after she said here's the best hamburger, and then right before, here's the best shake. And then after the end, we have peers, and everyone overlooks them. But your familial influence carries so much more weight than people realize. So if you tell your siblings or your local and close knit friends, hey, this has been awesome, chances are they're going to trust you a heck of a lot more than a celebrity. So I chose to focus on small businesses and peer influencers, try to give them both a path to make something of their lives online. And that's what we've been doing. We've been a matchmaker, and it's been good to see that people are having their careers start because of us.
That's awesome. That's a brilliant approach to it too. Because like you said, like if a startup can't pay you 20,000 a month, I mean that's probably more than they're bringing in revenue. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So we kind of talked a little bit about your past. You gave us a little insight about what you're doing now, the present. But what does the future hold for Joe? What do you think is kind of the biggest thing that you want to accomplish in your lifetime?
Oh boy. So aside from just once again having fuck you money, that's a goal everyone should aspire towards, I think. Another thing I really want to do, and I have a series of books that I started. It's like 180 something titles. What I did was I looked at the top 15 MBA programs. So I have an MBA from Arizona State, and I said, okay, well, what are they trying to teach? Look at everyone, try to distill once again down in all these little concepts. Like, how do I make a children's books out of these? So I've been playing around, and I've been pushing this. My goal here is to increase the level of education for future generations of entrepreneurs, because a lot of people get to college and they still don't understand, the concept of recurring costs versus fixed costs, which, can put them out on the streets pretty quick. They don't understand the concept of compounding interest. And they're really simple concepts, really. But if you have an early education on that, then by the time you're at a point where you can make a serious decision, you're just that much more informed.
Wow, that's awesome. So it kind of seems like well, I'm not even gonna assume. I kind of want to ask. So, that if that is what you want to accomplish, what do you think is your purpose? What do you think is the thing that drives you to that?
I kind of think that inherently there is no specific purpose. It's just where I choose to spend time at any point in the day. Right now, I really want to make sure that I can connect anyone that wants to make cash with their social influence with anyone that wants to pay for it. So that's just been a big draw for me. So I see it as really just multiple plates that I'm trying to spin. And so long as none of the plates fall off the little stick and break on the ground, then I'm doing my job. Part of what I want to do is, I guess, the plumbing of it. There's the connections aspect. So not really being a content company or a media company or anything powerful, but facilitating the ease. I think the educational aspect is the same way. It's facilitating a different level of success. So I guess in a way, teaching, but without actually being a teacher.
Okay. And I think at the heart of a lot of entrepreneurs there is that desire to pass on knowledge and to help their fellow entrepreneur. And that's one of the things that drew me into entrepreneurship was the people. So we talked about the past, we talked about the present, and we talked a little bit about what you want to do moving forward. But I want to talk about legacy. If there was one piece of advice that would serve as your legacy moving forward, what would it be?
Always consider the consequences of your actions. So it's a little thing that I actually inherited from my father that he'd always tell me. And growing up, I'm like, okay, you're basically saying don't go drink and drive. You're saying don't go do stupid stuff. But then I started, reflecting on it further as I've grown, and I see that it's applicable everywhere. So there's an action to sending, consequence of sending the angry email to the client versus being calm and collective and then winning that client back. There is the consequence of showing up late, and the action being, go to bed earlier if that's what's needed. So I like the cause and effect distillation of advice to pass down to pretty much anyone because it is fairly universal.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I just have one more question for you. Again, thank you very much for your time. I think that you absolutely have added a ton of value with this call, and I do appreciate it. But is there anything about yourself that you feel is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
Nothing in particular. I think it's handy for people to try to define themselves at some point and, and look back at it 10 years later to see how much it holds true. At one point in time, I refer to myself as, let's see, how did I phrase this? An optimistically paranoid, ruthless gentleman, meaning that, I would always try to see the opportunity. I'd be optimistic, but I'd be paranoid in the sense of like Andy Grove of Intel. He wrote a book called Only the Paranoid Survive. And it was about always assume that someone's going to be better, faster, stronger than you, and therefore you have to, make the best product possible. Ruthless gentleman had to be, business is business. And so you make the hard decisions when you have to, but you don't be a dick about it. Since then, I looked at it, I'm like, that doesn't define me anymore. Now I kind of call myself the black hat Eagle Scout with an MBA. I have a background in doing things that there's certain rule sets that are defined by major sites, but I figure out the way the rules actually work. But at the same time, I'm an ethical guy and I'm a businessman at heart.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, everybody, if you want to get into contact with Joe, I very highly encourage you to reach out. And Joe, maybe you could give a little insight as to how people could get in contact with you.
Sure. So I'm fairly active on Twitter. It's by my handle actually. It's CYGNUS SEO, Cygnus SEO. Additionally, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm Joe Sinkwitz. There's two of us, but I'm the one that has the search background. and that's pretty much it. If you ever want to talk about search or influence, you'll be able to find me on Intellifluence.com.
Fantastic. All right. Well, again, everybody, this has been another Project Egg interview. And today we've been talking with Joe Sinkwitz from Phoenix, Arizona. Joe, thanks a bunch.
Thanks a lot, Ben.